Welcome back to I Am Me, the channel where we're going to be discovering who we are and why we're here and what is this new spiritual awakening that everyone keeps talking about. But first I want to dive into how I ended up here. So I became a dad very young. Well, at 26, I had my first child, my only child. She's currently aging up her 10th birthday. And it's been a journey. Any parent will tell you that it's easy to have a child, but it's difficult to raise them. That's the real challenge. And one of the things that I learned was that in order for me to shape my daughter's mind into becoming the person that I knew she could be, I couldn't just tell her what to do because they don't listen. None of us listen to our parents, ever, right? Think back to when you were a kid. Your mum and dad always told you stuff, told you not to play with that boy and, don't do drugs and don't do this and that. And they tell you all these things because they're trying to keep you safe. But you do them anyway and you learn yourself. And you do what you do because you're watching what they do. Your parents never actually did what they told you to do. They just did what they wanted to do. And, the old saying, do as I say and not as I do, just rings in my mind, And what I learned was that if I wanted my daughter to become the person I knew she could be, I first had to show her that that was possible. And that's a very difficult burden to undertake, especially when the minute you start that kind of internal introspection, you start to realize that you're deeply flawed. Just like everyone else, you've got so many flaws, and your ego is an absolute weapon of mass destruction. And it will keep you from becoming everything you want to be. And so I found myself under the pressures of being a new dad, struggling to earn enough money to pay for the bills and keep a roof over my family's heads. And there were times where the thoughts in my mind became dark. And I didn't know how I was going to survive. Really didn't know if I could do it. And the doubt and just the internal guidance wasn't there. And I found myself, I think my daughter was about 6 at this time. She was upstairs playing in her room. And I came home from work after a bad day, after a series of many bad days. And I was on my knees, hyperventilating. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. There wasn't a solution. There wasn't anyone coming to save me. And I felt helpless and terrified in the future. And I broke down and I had a serious panic attack. And my absolutely beautiful fiance, she came to my rescue and she coaxed me out of it and she spoke to me and she encouraged me to go and see a friend of mine who, during lockdown, he had his own worries. He just started his own business and was plunged into lockdown and financial despair. And I was going on long walks with him and we were talking about it and just trying to find a solution, something that would help. And at this time, he'd already found his solution. He'd started to use mushrooms, magic mushrooms, golden teachers in particular. Sorry, my dog's wandering off on his own. Odie! Where are you going? We're going this way. Hey, come on, let's go. He's deaf. So keeping him under control is interesting. He's coming. But he had found that by using magic mushrooms and microdosing magic mushrooms that he was able to not necessarily completely erase his anxiety, but definitely find ways through it to overcome it and to recover from it. And we'd already discussed me doing this, and I have got a very overactive imagination and didn't think that psychedelics would be the answer to my problems. I actually believed that it would make it worse, not better. And that was because of the conditioning at that time. Everything that we know about psychedelics, or at least everything we've been told about psychedelics, is that they're dangerous and that, you know, they fry your brain. Remember that advert of the egg in the frying pan getting absolutely destroyed? I was like, oh, I don't want my brain to turn into that. But in my despair and my lowest moment in my life, I decided to give in. If my partner was advising me that she believed that this would help, because she didn't know any other way to help me, then I thought, well, what options do I have? Let's give it a go. He's found his way back here. Odie! And so, reluctantly, I gave in. And I contacted my friend, who just so happened to have some, and I explained the situation, and we went for this walk. And it was a bad day for a walk. I tell you, it was honestly the worst storm I have ever been in my life. The sky was just black. There wasn't a single bit of light in the sky. We went to a wood not far from where I lived, which my friend goes to often. And we sat in his car, and he gave me these shrooms, which didn't taste great. It wasn't awful, but you need to go down with some chocolate. So we ate these shrooms, we had a little drink, and we went for a walk, and I just confided in my friend. I spoke to him about my problems, about my feelings. He shared because he understood. And at one point, about half an hour in, I started to feel a little strange. I started to notice this strange, like, honeycomb pattern that was just everywhere. It was present on everything, and I thought it was external. And then looked at my hand and realised that it was on my hand. And then I realised, I think I'm actually seeing the lens cover of my eye. It was very peculiar, the level of high definition that I had in everything that I could see. It was almost like I was looking at everything for the first time. And this was fun. This took me out of my low, and I became curious, and we were now on some magical adventure in the woods. It was chucking it down with rain, but somehow it didn't matter. It was irrelevant. In fact, I could feel that there was an energy in the air, an atmosphere that my body was responding to. I could feel it in the atmosphere. And at one point, I had this moment where I visualized, it was almost like a glass revolving door. And inside this little glass rotisserie, I could see all of my memories, all of my core memories and moments of my past. And I noticed one thing, that as much as there were good and bad in there, the good moments, the good memories, vastly, absolutely, mammothly outweigh the negative ones. But the negative ones were vivid, they were brightly coloured, they stood out. And the good ones just faded into the background. And in that moment of realisation that I was just focusing on the negative ones and holding on to those negative memories rather than appreciating and being grateful for all of the good that I've seen and experienced in my life, that all I've done is hold on to the emotions that were attached to those awful, tragic and traumatic memories. And I think we all do that. And this is where it gets a bit odd, because in that moment where I'm having this epiphany, I'm having this realization, this moment of enlightenment, the sky opened up and the sun just shone down on me, and there was this immense golden glow, this ray of light that just hit me. And it was at the precise moment of realization, and it warmed me up, and the emotions that filled me were completely overwhelming, to the point where I immediately got on the phone to my dad. I won't get into the relationship I have with my dad because it's irrelevant, but I think my relationship with my dad is most probably very similar to most young men's relationships with their dad. But I had to call my dad, and I needed to tell him what I've discovered, what I learned, what I experienced. And I was like, I've figured something out. Like, we don't need to think like this. We have a choice. So after the phone call with my dad, we walked into this little wooded area, and I'd never been to this place before, and it was literally around the corner from where I lived. So it was so peculiar to be in a completely new environment, but also not to be in a place that was actually my stomping ground, that I felt like I knew it like the back of my hand. And now I found myself in this little oasis that was round the corner from where I lived. And we're walking through the woods. It was squelchy and horrible, not too dissimilar to what I'm having to stomp through at the minute. And then we opened up into this pine wood that was in the middle of a forest. So there was normal wood and mud and bog, and then pine. And the air was filled with this beautiful aroma of pine wood. And the texture of the ground became soft and spongy because of all the needles from the pine that had, created like this little drainage area on the floor. The ground was like good to walk on. It was comfortable to walk on. It was very spongy and bouncy. And that was the first thing that I noticed, was this very peculiar texture. So I'm sort of like spacing out and seeing magical things and experiencing this, psychedelic, trippy moment of self, whilst also being in this completely new environment in a very comfortable location. And the smell of the pine was in the air. And I don't know if you're familiar with pine trees. I would hope that you are, but the bark on a pine tree is so dramatic and cavernous, and it's cracked, very similar to the tree that I'm standing here next to. It's very dramatic in its bark, but the crevices are much deeper. And because of the rain was just gushing through all of these, dramatic caverns. And in my mind's eye, I was staring at this beautiful waterfall. The sun was beaming through the trees at this point in time. The light was making the water glisten. And I was just trapped in the magic of the detail of the world around me, and wondering, why is it that I'm only seeing this now? And in a moment that I couldn't quite explain to you, I decided that I had to become a part of it. I needed to not necessarily disturb it, but just to become one with it. And my friend had sort of walked on a few paces and turned around and spotted me just standing there with my hand against this tree, just in awe of what was happening and just being involved in the drama that was happening around me. And he looked at me and he went, "You're there. You found it." And I had. I didn't know what it was that I'd found at that point in time, but whatever it was, I definitely found it. And from that moment on, there was absolutely no way that I could ever go back to being the version of myself that I was before, because I'd realised that version of me didn't really exist. It was an idea of me. It was an imaginary version of the person I believed that I was, but not aligned with who it was that I wanted to be. So I made a conscious choice to make this my focus, that I wanted to imagine the version of myself and every detail of who that person was, and make it my focus, my intention to become that version of me, which is very difficult because it's very, and I'm sure all of you who are watching this right now have experienced this yourself. It's very difficult to become someone else when the people around you won't allow you to be, and not because of some, selfish need, but because you have played a part in all of these people's lives. And in order for you to become this new version of you, now the version of you that once was isn't there anymore. So they desperately try to keep you in that space. And as soon as you start to become more positive, the negative people will come at you first. That's the thing I noticed initially, was all of a sudden people who I thought were my friends became very hateful towards me. And I feel like it's because you are holding up a mirror and reflecting back this idea that I don't have to be what you think I am, I can be whatever I want to be. And I think that challenges their idea of who they are, which in turn creates their own inner turmoil and negative emotion, and they can only project because that's what we've been conditioned to do, internally project our emotions onto other people. And so I knew that I needed to make a change in terms of my career, my friends, and in some cases my family members. If you allow negative people and negativity to continually have access to your current being, then it will consume you, because that's what it does. Misery loves company, and it will just try to pull you in. And so I found myself in a position of loneliness. I manifested a new job, earning more money and more time at home with my family. I've been off work now for 6 weeks, and it's been great. It's been nice to know that I don't have to worry about money. I don't have to worry about how I'm going to pay my bills, or where the next paycheck's going to come from. I just get to enjoy my days and live them out as I want to. And I've decided that what I want to do is this. I want to make these videos. I want to try and help other people who are in that same position, or who are currently going through this process of self-discovery. And I also want other people who are on this journey to help me, because I'm still, to some degree, a little lost. I feel like after 3 years I should have I should have got there by now. But I think that I've spent such a long time not doing this inner work that there's a lot that needs to be done. In my next video, I'm going to be sharing with you the exact formula that I used to help me first identify the issues that I had that were hiding within, and how it was that I managed to change those habits to become the version of myself that I truly wanted to be. And I'll be answering some of your questions too. So if you're lost like me and you're curious and have questions about this experience, then please leave them in the comments below, and I will answer as many of them as I can in my next video. Now get out of here.